Welcome back to another edition of the Knight Report podcast. I'm your host, Mike Broadbent. Joining me once again is my co-host, Richie O'Leary. Today we're going to give Richie's thoughts on the opening win against Howard. He was not available. He was at a wedding this past weekend, so you'll
Not
get to hear.
choice.
Not by choice. We'll get into that and what he thought of the game. We'll get into the PFF grades of how things went for the Scarlet Knights. And we're going to do something a little different. We're going to go around the Big Ten and around Rutgers out-of-conference opponents and talk about how their seasons have gone so far and what to look out for with all those teams, at least for the beginning part of the schedule. But first, this podcast is presented to you by Knight and Day Apparel. Get ready for football and tailgating season with Knight and Day Apparel. Our apparel is designed to keep you comfortable and stylish from pregame excitement to the final whistle. Whether you're grilling in the parking lot or cheering in the stands, our high-quality gear has you covered with unbeatable comfort and team spirit. Use our promo code Rutgers Rivals to get 10% off your purchase. Score big this season and keep shopping with Knight and Day Apparel. All right, Rich.
A lot of good stuff.
Anything new on here?
No, I think it's just almost that jacket might be new. It's Adidas. It was only $40. It's not bad.
Yeah, that's a great deal.
A little chop action down here too. Adidas, $40 for Adidas. You're not going to find that anywhere.
Yeah.
And then these 6 women's fleece shorts. Kind of wish they were in men's because like kind of look sick. But I'm a big sweatshirt guy.
Oh yeah, same. Yeah. Especially working from home.
Oh,
nothing like it.
Yep. Anyway.
So let's get your thoughts on this game. Obviously, you watched it, on tape. You didn't get to watch it live. But what did you think of Rutgers' performance against Howard?
I will say my phone was definitely in the background live, but it's hard to go back and forth. But Yeah, I did miss a lot the first go around. The second go around is a lot easier when no one's in your ear screaming. But yeah, no, I mean everything was kind of what we expected. Solid defensive day, but the offense just kind of did their thing. It's just a run game. It's almost the same thing as last year, but a little bit more accurate at quarterbacks. And he actually trusted Ethan to throw a couple balls that like you didn't really see Rutgers throw over the middle a ton last year. You're seeing them throw right over the middle this time. Now, where there's some questionable throws, of course, there always is with quarterback play, but there wasn't any that it was like, oh, there it goes, wide open, 10 yards over his head. Like it was more like, hey, he threw it away. He made the smart play. Hey, that one, it was a catch. Don't get me wrong, but it's like a better linebacker probably jumps the gun there and grabs that ball. But overall, I mean, they could have just ran the ball 100 more times and not even passed the ball at all against Howard. That Howard rushing defense was like non-existent. But overall, I thought this was just a typical ground and pound Rutgers football game, and they looked pretty good despite, especially on defense, despite missing two of their star linebackers.
Yeah, they were missing 2 star linebackers. Obviously, Toure is out for the season, but you have Tyreem Powell still recovering from his Achilles injury, and we also were without star safety Flip Dixon, who we have very high hopes for. But I thought all the replacements stepped up big time. If you're talking about Daryl Jabome, you're talking about Moses Walker, and you're talking about Kaj Sanders, I thought those were 3 of the best players that were on the field this past Thursday for Rutgers. Tell us a little bit about what you thought of those young guys breaking out against Howard on Thursday night.
Yeah, I thought Jabome specifically looked really good. He was all around the ball, obviously 14 total tackles. So there goes our little prediction we had. Most tackles on the team this year. I'm just saying, looking good so far. Yeah, Kaj Sanders, I thought, stepped up a lot. I thought he looked really good in that safety role. And even on the pick 6 from Eric Rogers, you see how fast he was down the field? It's like bolting down the field for the block. And I'm like, oh, my God. Like, very, very interested to see how he develops over the next couple years because you're going to have him for the next couple years. So he filled in really well. Not having Wesley Bailey, I feel like, hurt a little bit, and that's probably why there was just 1 sack on the day. They still got 14 pressures, which is still pretty good. But other than that, I mean, there's a couple other guys like Troy Rainey's probably a rotational guy. He wasn't there. Al-Shadi Salam's probably a rotational guy. He wasn't there. Bo Mascow looked really good in his role. Yeah, I mean, overall, I thought the fill-ins were kind of flawless, so to speak. But again, Howard, so.
Yeah, there's a big caveat there. Rutgers at one point was graded out as the highest rated team, according to PFF's metrics. I think after the adjustments from this past weekend.
Oh, that is today. It's Tuesday.
Rutgers is now still in the top 5, but I think they're at number 5, but still a fantastic grade overall at 92.6. They're fourth only behind Louisville, Auburn, and Ole Miss. Their opponent up for the upcoming week, Akron, is one of the worst graded teams in the FBS. They are currently at 131st out of 134 teams, and one of those teams hasn't played yet. So that's Ball State. So Akron, from a PFF analytical standpoint, is a huge mismatch for Rutgers. We'll get into that matchup later in the week. We have a beat writer lined up. Turns out Akron doesn't really have a full-time beat writer, so we needed to be a little creative with this.
Yes.
But we will have a full Akron preview, so I don't want to go too deeply into that. But some PFF grades that stood out to me. Let's start with Ethan Kaliak-Banis. He graded out at a 73.6 grade, which was 84th out of 227 quarterbacks that qualified for grading based on snap counts. That was 10th out of 18 in terms of Big Ten quarterbacks. If he can perform like that all year, where he's just middle of the pack Big Ten or slightly above average Big Ten quarterback, that's all we need, really. Especially when, guys like how the running backs performed, how the offensive line performed, how the tight end room performed. Yeah. Receivers need a little work, but did that kind of jive with what you saw at Ethan, right around that 74-ish grade?
I'd say that's right. It's not like he was the best quarterback in the world. It's not like, oh my God, like this kid's like a superstar, bar none. Like I'll say it, like Dylan Raiola had a hell of a performance in week 1. You watch him, that's the superstar. Then you watch Ethan, it's like, middle of the pack kid. I think I said it in one of our preview pods. Like a lot of people had Ethan ranked as like the 18th or 17th best quarterback in the Big Ten. That's just, it's factually incorrect. Like he's probably more near, I think I said the 15 to 12 range, which is fine. You could even argue he might go a little higher than that. Reuniting with his old OC, you could just tell he's just more comfortable back there. He's very quiet too, which I don't know if it's a good or bad thing. As a captain, you want someone that's a little bit more vocal back there, but the guys do rally around him, and I think he is what he is. He's just a solid quarterback. He's not a superstar. He's probably not an NFL guy, but he'll get the job done at the end of the day, and he's not going to make a stupid mistake that's going to cost you the game.
Yep, that's kind of my read on it too. Some of the surrounding players on the offense really surprised me with their grades. Sam Brown graded out as the 9th best running back in the FBS. He graded out as an 83.7, so that's 9th out of 312. Kyle Monangai also had a really good grade at 77.0. That's 34th out of 312. That shouldn't surprise. I think they both combined for over 100 total yards. Both had a touchdown.
Yeah.
The thing that really blew me away were Kenny Fletcher's grade. So Kenny Fletcher, he only had 4 catches, but in terms of PFF grade, he graded out at a 90.7, which is second in all of FBS. So that is second out of 233 tight ends that qualified. And then if you look at the offensive line, I'm just going to go through 1 through 5. You had Colin Pierce, left tackle, 78.3. That's the 25th best tackle out of 472 qualifiers. You had Brian Felter, left guard, 82nd ranked guard out of 432. Gus Zelinskis, the 5th ranked center out of 254 centers. Kobe Asamoah, he ended up grading at, I think he was on like the first team all Big Ten for this past week, according to PFF. He ranked 2nd in terms of all guards at an 87.8. That's 2nd out of 432. And then you had Tyler Needham, who graded out at an 83.8. That's 11th best on the offensive tackle side out of 472. Did any of that surprise you? Because I was just blown away by those numbers.
Nothing crazy. I mean, I thought they just handled the Howard defensive line pretty much up front. I didn't think there was anything insane. And then when there was an extra blitzer or something, you saw Kyle Monangai pick it up. So it was kind of just like, I thought their blocking in general was just really good. Pass blocking and then run blocking, of course, is just, it's kind of easy when you have a guy like Kyle Monangai who just bounces off of people. So give him a little bit of a hole, a little bit of space, and boom, gone. Like you could have ran for 300 yards if you really wanted to in this game, in my opinion. But they didn't want to risk it either.
Yep. It'll be interesting to see if those grades kind of hold up as the schedule gets harder, but great signs on offense. Defensively, I thought some standouts. Start off from the top. Rutgers has the highest rated corner in the Power 4 in Eric Rogers, who finished the game with a 91.0 grade. That's 2nd overall. There's only one player in the FBS ranked higher, and that is a player from Dayton. Well, I guess he's the FCS, but still,
But
only one player rated above him. Some other players that stood out: Daryl Jabome, he graded out 78.8. Moses Walker, 76.4.
mm-hmm.
The defensive line, we got 14 pressures, like you said, with only one sack. There
Mm-hmm.
wasn't a ton of great grades there. 72.2 for Keontae Hamilton. Malcolm Ray had a 67.9. Jordan Thompson had a 69.0. Aaron Lewis had a 64.6. There's definitely a lot of things we can clean up defensively. Did that kind of jive with what you saw as well, that the offense kind of outplayed the defense in this game?
Yeah, and that's not typical for a Greg Schiano team. That's actually the complete opposite of a Greg Schiano team. But I mean, you're missing a lot of guys. You're missing your star safety. You're missing your 2 linebackers. You're missing one of your star defensive ends. Like you missed a lot of pieces, and there's a little bit of a skill gap. I shouldn't even say a little bit. Some of these guys, there's a big skill gap. I love Jordan Thompson. I think he has a high ceiling, and I think he could be really good, but he's not Wesley Bailey. I think Jabome is going to be really good. I think Walker is going to be pretty good, but they're not at the level of a Tyreen Powell when fully healthy, or the level of a Mo Toure when he's out there. And even like the Flip Dixon to Kaj Sanders, everyone like raved about Kaj Sanders in his role, and he played good. He did really good in his first ever start as a true freshman. That's more than you can ask for him. But it's not Flip Dixon, who's a 5th-year guy who's probably going to be in the NFL next year and probably be a draft pick come April, May, whenever the draft is. So there is a skill gap. I think the interior on the defensive line is still a little bit of a concern between Keontae Hamilton and Malcolm Ray. There's not really another guy behind them, so to speak. I know Keyshawn Griffin got a little bit of time. Troy Rainey was also out, and he's going to be one of those rotational pieces as well. So I feel like there's a little bit of concern on the depth in the interior defensive line specifically, because I think people expected Malcolm Ray to make a bigger splash than he did, but it's also game 1, so I'd say give him a little bit of time and see what he can do game 2. If he struggles again versus Akron, which offensive line we know is very questionable, that's where you'd be a little bit more concerned.
Yeah, totally agree there. Were there any players that we didn't kind of hit on that you wanted to highlight in general before we kind of talk about some future opponents?
Let me think. I'm looking through it all. Eric Rogers. I mean, we didn't really talk about Longer Beam, but if you're not talking about your cornerback 1 in either a bad way or good way, it's probably a good thing. It's probably just a very quiet day because there's not really much they could do against them. Jordan Walker's interesting because he's kind of carved himself out into a rotational defensive end now, and that's a former tight end / preferred walk-on / JUCO guy, or maybe it was Milford Academy, maybe it was prep school, one of the two. But either way, he's kind of carved himself into a little bit of a role, and you're seeing a little bit. I know it's Howard, so you got to take it with a grain of salt. But you saw a lot of preferred walk-on guys out there. Joe Lasardi's a preferred walk-on guy. Yeah. Michael Robinson II's a preferred walk-on guy. Like there's a lot of preferred walk-ons. Timmy Hinspeeder got 20+ snaps. So I mean, the preferred walk-on is alive and well at Rutgers.
It certainly is, and it's a part of the program that Schiano really emphasizes is having a strong walk-on program. We'll see how the walk-on program across the country changes with the upcoming changes to how many players you could have on your roster and how many scholarships you can give out. But Rutgers historically has done really well getting guys who contribute through the walk-on program, and that continues with the 2024 team. Now, I wanted to kind of go around some of our upcoming opponents, talk about how their seasons are going so far. Obviously, we'll start with Akron. Like I said previously, we'll have a full preview for Akron later in the week. They went to the Horseshoe in Columbus this past weekend. They played Ohio State pretty close early on, but they ended up losing 52-6. Their starting quarterback, Ben Finley, got banged up. This is a team that really struggled to, keep pressure off their quarterback. Their offensive line is one of the worst in the FBS. Their defensive line was fairly stout, but this is a team that's coming in a bit of a walking wounded mentality on Saturday against Rutgers. Rutgers has 2 more days of time off. Rutgers played a relatively pain-free game against Howard. Anything on Akron that you wanted to touch on?
You might be seeing a backup quarterback that's mobile in Taj Bullock as their starter, and we know that's not a good sign.
It's like if Rutgers had 2 different voodoo dolls that were always getting stabbed. It was the Rutgers against mobile quarterbacks and the Rutgers against backup quarterbacks, and we're just getting both of them stabbed with pins and needles this week. So hopefully Rutgers can play better than it usually does against backup and or mobile quarterbacks.
Yeah, but overall, Akron's not very good. They're banged up. You should be able to beat them very easily. You saw what Ohio State did to them, even though they were down 3-0 technically at the start of the game. But yeah, no, I don't think there's really much of a threat. But interesting fun fact, Taj Bullock did try to come to Rutgers via the transfer portal before ending up at Akron. That was via Virginia Tech, who's kind of, look at that little segue I got there. Virginia Tech, who we can talk about next.
Yeah, Virginia Tech was a 2-touchdown favorite going into the Music City to play Vanderbilt. They went down 17-0 to start the game.
Mm-hmm.
Brent Pry, after the game, said his team was shell-shocked. Virginia Tech ended up storming back. They took a 7-point lead in the fourth quarter, only to have that lead squandered, went to overtime. Kyron Drones got hurt. This is as big of a disaster for a team that was getting similar kind of hype to Rutgers in the offseason, where a lot of people talked about them as, a dark horse for the college football playoff, possible ACC championship contender. And they took about as big of a steam and dump as you could possibly take week one. And they got some injuries to deal with, but we'll talk about more in a little bit. Where do you think Virginia Tech is standing after week one?
I mean, I had this game on like in the background because there was just rain delays with the other side of cover. But this Diego Paiva, like dog. He, you know what the funny part is? I'm sitting there watching, and they're like, "Yeah, he came from New Mexico State." I was like, "Oh, that's Jerry Kill." Like, I didn't even realize they hired Jerry Kill.
They hired Jerry Kill. They hired a lot of people from New Mexico State, and a lot of players from New Mexico State came over.
Genius kind of move, to be honest with you. If they're a good team, pluck their entire team and pluck their coach while you're at it too.
I mean, that's what a lot of teams do. You look at what James Madison did, or I'm sorry, what Indiana did with James Madison. They hired their coach. They brought over a bunch of players. You look at what I forget who hired the Holy Cross coach. Was that James Madison?
Yeah. That was James Madison.
So James Madison hired the Holy Cross coach, brought over a bunch of their players. Yeah, it's the new way of things with the transfer portal. But sorry, I cut you off.
No, you're good. I just thought Virginia Tech didn't really look that good at all. On top of it, they're banged up now. They're starting quarterbacks hurt. They're starting running backs hurt. I thought Bashal Tutin was actually a pretty good guy, a pretty good running back. But now with him banged up, I thought Kyron Drones was a pretty good quarterback. How the hell that guy was, like, even watching the game, how was he not the starter last year until Rutgers knocked out the starter? I think it's just bad coaching in general. But it is what it is. I don't think Virginia Tech's as hyped anymore. And now they're getting a lot of backlash on social media. I don't know if you saw, they posted the graphic for game 2, and it's like 1-0, on to the next one. And it's like, wait a second. You lost.
I was reading into that too. Brett Pry does that for every game. It's kind of like, let's have a 1-0 mindset, but it just doesn't look good. I agree.
We know as Rutgers people, it doesn't work. Ain't that right, Kyle Flood?
So I've been listening to a lot of Virginia Tech podcasts this offseason just to get a feel, because this was kind of the unofficial start to the season for Rutgers week 4 against Virginia Tech. The tune that they were playing all offseason versus the tune they're playing this past 2 days, 3 days since they put out a lot of these podcasts put out episodes. I don't think there's a more down bad program in college football outside of maybe Florida State right now than what Virginia Tech is feeling. Brent Pry has never beaten a Power 5 program or Power 4 program that ended up with a winning record ever as a head coach. This is his 3rd year now. People are basically done with this team, done with Brent Pry, done with their athletic director. Like, there's going to probably be some pretty sweeping changes there. They're questioning why, the play calling, the preparedness, the discipline of the team, a lot of things that they're complaining about you would kind of never hear about a Greg Schiano-led team. This Virginia Tech squad got pushed around all afternoon against Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt doesn't necessarily have a ton of talent on the team either. If you would have watched any New Mexico State tape last year, you should have known that Diego Pavia is going to run the ball a lot. He's not the strongest arm guy. He's just kind of like a guy who scoots around and makes plays. Diego Pavia ran for 104 yards against Virginia Tech. He threw 75% completion percentage, 2 touchdown passes. He had another one on the ground. You knew that coming in that this was basically the whole team, and bottling him up was super important, and they weren't able to do that. On top of that, Their starting star safety ended up breaking his collarbone, it sounds like. This guy Stroman, who played strong safety for them. He started 35 games in his career, and their backup is basically a guy who's never played. And they were starting a young safety next to him in the secondary. They have this guy, Mansour Lane, who was like a freshman All-American. I think his younger brother is committed to Ohio State. He's like a 5-star kid. And he's basically just had a big drop his sophomore and now junior season. Apparently he was like just getting toasted by these Vanderbilt receivers. This is a game that, Rutgers really could just beat the hell out of Virginia Tech if they continue to go on this backslide. Because if you look at their next 2 opponents, Marshall graded really well last week against Stony Brook.
Don't sleep on them. They're decent.
They won by 45-6. They're a top 10 graded team on PFF. Old Dominion is their opponent after that, who has beaten them 2 out of the last 4 times they played, including the game they played in 2022.
Yeah.
They have Aaron Young on that team, who was their leading rusher last week. They almost beat South Carolina last week.
Yeah.
At South Carolina. So they have a couple opponents that they can't sleep on, and Rutgers is getting a bye in between. I was a little hesitant to really get confident about that game, but I'm starting to get to the point where I'm almost saying it's a lock that Rutgers is going to win based on the things surrounding the Virginia Tech program right now. I know you've gone long on Virginia Tech, but I feel like it's warranted just because of how important this game is. Even if it's not going to be like a matchup of undefeated teams anymore, getting that win on the road, I think, like I've said in our preseason coverage, would really just supercharge this. It has the opportunity to supercharge the season.
Yeah, road game down there is not easy. I don't care how bad the team is, regardless. You put that at night, a little sketchy. But I don't think it's going to be a night game. I think it's going to be an afternoon game, whether it be 12 or I think ACC does 4:30s, which is weird.
Okay.
So it could be one of those two. I think they also do 3:30s. I don't understand how the ACC schedules their TV stuff, but it's probably why their contract is so bad as it is. So whatever.
Yeah, they've got that CW market to worry about. If you want to watch the Virginia Tech game this weekend, I guess most people won't because they'll be at Rutgers Stadium. But if you aren't and you want to watch some of their game, that'll be on the CW.
Gross.
Anything else about Virginia Tech that you wanted to hit on before we move on to Washington?
No, kind of maybe looking way too far ahead here, but conspiracy theory me says when Rutgers wins this game, Brent Pry is eventually going to get fired this season, and Joe Harris-Simiak will be named as a candidate for that job. Looking way too far ahead.
I think they're going to have to hire an athletic director before that, though, because not many athletic directors get a chance to hire a third head coach, especially when they fired the first 2, in Justin Fuente and probably Brent Pry.
Yeah, not a good look.
Speaking of new coaches, let's talk about the Washington Huskies. They played Weber State this past weekend. Washington was held scoreless through a quarter and a half against an FCS opponent, but then ended up winning 35-3. This is a team with a new coach in Jed Fish, a totally new everything, new quarterback, new receivers, new defense. I think they only returned 2 starters from last year. Will Rogers started for Washington. He's the transfer from Mississippi State. He had a pretty good game. He went 20 of 26 for 250 yards and a touchdown. They've got a stud running back who transferred in from Arizona with Jed Fish, Jonah Coleman. He had 16 carries for 127 yards and 3 touchdowns. But I think the weakness for this Washington team is going to be the run defense, which bodes really well for Rutgers. They allowed the starting running back for Weber State to rush for 16 attempts for 105 yards. That's almost 7 yards an attempt. I think this is another team that matches up really well for Rutgers in the Washington Huskies. What did you see out of them this weekend?
Yeah, I think Will Rogers is a dude. I don't think there's a question about it. I think their offense is actually kind of a little potent, which is not a surprise because it was solid last year, and I know they lost a lot of starters, but good running back, good quarterback, good wide receiver core. But like you said, they gave up 105 yards to the starting running back for the Fighting Damian Lillards. So, I mean, I think that it's still going to be an interesting game. I think the fact that it's home gives Rutgers a significant advantage, and the fact that they have to travel not only midway across the country, all the way across the country. That West Coast, the East Coast thing is going to mess up some teams this year. And I think that might be one of those teams might be Washington. Friday night in Piscataway, short week, traveling all the way across the country. It's not going to be easy, but I think Rutgers has a really good shot with that one too. And we might be looking at a 4-0 Rutgers.
Could be. Another anecdote about Washington, they only had one sack on the day against an FCS team. Sound familiar? And they also did not force a turnover, and they did not commit a turnover. So we'll have to kind of wait and see on Washington. Washington's schedule coming up is they play at home against Eastern Michigan, then they play at home versus Washington State for the Apple Cup. That's going to be an interesting early season game. That's usually the last game of the season for both teams. So it'll be weird to have a September Apple Cup for the two Washington programs. And then they play at home against Northwestern. Their first road game of the season will be on a short week at Rutgers across the country, like you said. So it'll be a wake-up call for them because they have a really tough schedule after that. They play at home versus Michigan. They play on the road at Iowa. They play on the road at Indiana. They play at home versus USC, who was arguably the most surprising team from the Big Ten this weekend. And then they play at Penn State, home versus UCLA, and then finish off the season at Oregon. That is a brutal, brutal schedule. So
not easy. So wait and see.
The last team that I guess we could cover the next two opponents. The next opponent for Rutgers on the schedule was Nebraska. According to the schedule, they ended up beating UTEP 40-7. This is a game where it never really was in doubt from the kickoff to the end of the game. Dylan Raiola looks to be who we thought he might be based on his recruiting ranking.
Mahomes.
He looks a lot like Patrick Mahomes. He plays similar to him as well. I'm not ready to call him, the next Patrick Mahomes, but he really impressed me on Saturday with how he played in his first college game.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of Dylan Raiola. He's just freaky good. I know he's not Patrick Mahomes, like you said, but a lot of people say he does look like him. But I found out number 15 is not because of Patrick Mahomes. It's actually because of Tim Tebow, which he tries to model his game after a little bit too, which I don't see it, but sure. But all the sideways passes, the off-balance, off-platform throws, and the connecting on 70% of his passes, he looks really, really good. Again, grain of salt, UTEP, are they any good? Probably not. But yeah, no, I just thought he looked really good. And this Nebraska team is going to be tough because it's not only a Nebraska team that's pretty solid, but a Nebraska team that's on the road, and that's 90-something thousand, maybe 100,000. I don't know how much their stadium holds. Of just crazy fans from Nebraska, and especially if they can get a win this weekend against Colorado, build a little more hype, and it could be a 4-0 Rutgers team versus an undefeated Nebraska team. So,
yeah, Nebraska's schedule is pretty easy leading up to the Rutgers game. They play UTEP last week, which they won. They play at home versus Colorado, home versus Northern Iowa, home versus Illinois. Then they go on the road to play at Purdue, which Purdue, man, they looked really good against Illinois State, or Indiana State, I'm sorry. Hudson Card looks like that guy. We all thought he could be in the portal. Then they play at home versus Rutgers before their bye. So they've got a fairly light schedule that ramps up against Purdue before us. So we will see how they do, but things are looking promising for the Cornhuskers. Final team Rutgers plays prior to their bye, which is where we'll cut things off for now, is USC. USC, like I said, might have been the most impressive Big Ten team in terms of performing above expectations this past weekend. They played LSU in Las Vegas, Nevada, in a neutral site game. Ended up winning that one late, 27-20. Their defense looked way better than I think anyone could have anticipated. Miller Moss went from a guy that a lot of people just thought was like, the guy filling in for Caleb Williams to an actual really good quarterback. They've got so many good receivers. And like I previously said, a defense that actually looks legit. I heard somebody talking about this on another podcast where they were like saying how all these Pac-12 teams are going to need to adjust to Big Ten defenses. And I think this is an example of, Big Ten defenses might have to adapt to Pac-12 offenses too. And if USC plays anything like what they did on, I guess it was Sunday night, this is going to be a tough out in the Big Ten this year.
Yeah, no, Miller Moss looked really good. The crazy part is LSU had like chances and they just blew it. giving up 14 in the fourth. Neusmeyer with the pick at the end, like not even to anyone, just straight to the defender. Yeah, I mean, if you're Brian Kelly, you got to be a little pissed off. But
Yeah.
where's my water bottle? Let's hit it or something. Water bottles undefeated this week. Can we talk about that? Billy Napier couldn't even open his after his loss. Brian Kelly's like punching it, and the water bottles like moving around, rolling around. It's like water bottles undefeated. Who'd have thought? But no, USC looks pretty good, and they're going to be a problem. And I think we kind of knew USC and Oregon were going to be fine adjusting. I think it was the other two that we thought were going to have some issues. Which, I mean, based on Weber State, kind of holding them to a scoreless quarter in Washington, and then who do UCLA play? I don't even remember.
UCLA played at Hawaii and barely hung on in that game.
So it's like between those two, I think we agree. Like those two are going to struggle to adjust, and these two are going to do just fine because look at the level of recruiting those two programs in USC and Oregon do. It's at the highest of high levels. Like I think USC right now might be the top class in 2025 for the Big Ten. Like it's just it's the way of the world, the way of NIL, I should say.
The only team I missed in my head, I messed up the schedule. The only team we didn't talk about or we didn't touch on at all in that middle six stretch is Wisconsin, who played Western Michigan. They ended up winning 28-14 in a game that was much closer than the final score would indicate. Western Michigan was winning in the fourth quarter before Wisconsin pulled away. This Wisconsin team just looks so mid. Like they're not a team that really scares me. I know it's early. There's a lot of weird results as we've seen week 1 and week 2. But I am not very impressed with this Wisconsin team at all right now. I don't think Tyler Van Dyke's the guy. Their running game's taken a big step back. They don't really have a go-to receiver. And then defensively, they have a couple studs, but Western Michigan was able to move the ball at will at times on Saturday. They had a few really long drives to start the game. So I don't know. I'm not particularly impressed with Wisconsin, and I think they've moved down in a lot of people's power rankings. What did you think of Wisconsin?
I just never thought Van Dyke was good. I thought he's always been pretty bad. Coming from Miami, he struggled. Look at what Miami does when they get a good quarterback. And so Ches Malusi has never really gone over 300-400 yards in the season. After this is year 5, 6. I don't know if you registered, I forget. They're just not good. The air raid it's just not a thing in the Big Ten. Like you can't attempt to do it. They've been talking about it for years. It's like air raid, and it's not going to happen. Like you never have the quarterback for it. You don't have the dogs up front, and you can get the speed all you want, but like just go back to old school Wisconsin ground and pound football. That's the way of the world. You have to get like big, massive linemen and just pound the ball up the middle and just nonstop run game. It's like almost like Rutgers offense, but get bigger linemen over there in Wisconsin, and you're good to go. Otherwise, it just doesn't work.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. So we really appreciate everybody who has participated in our giveaways. We announced our giveaway winners in the last episode. If you have not listened to that episode, do that. And if you are a winner, contact Richie at rurichie@gmail.com. I kind of teased in the last show that we're planning to do probably our best giveaway ever for leading up to the basketball season. I think everyone's going to be really excited. I
had it somewhere.
When Richie talked to me about what he was thinking and sent me the link, I was like, oh my God, I need one of those. That's going to really get a bunch of people hyped. So that's the tease. It's basketball related. That's all I'm going to say about that. If you guys like this kind of format where we discuss future opponents and how they've been kind of doing throughout the season, let us know in the comments below. And if you like it, we'll make a podcast each week about this.
Of course.
As you've already kind of said, later in the week we're going to be just doing a straight up preview for Akron. We're going to do a post-game show on Saturday after the game, probably around 5 o'clock. We're actually going to show up this time. Apologies again for how things went on Thursday. Just given, nobody was able to really get out of that lot easily. By the time I got home, I'd work on Friday, so it was just not going to happen. So apologies. We won't let that happen again, except for maybe the USC game.
That one's going to be tricky. I don't know what we're going to do with that.
4 a.m. Live show. I don't know if that's going to happen.
I don't know about that, but I am in contact with a local watering hole, we'll call it that, about potentially hosting a game watch party, but I'll be honest with you, I am not writing a single thing that day. If that's the case, I am drinking the booze with the boys. So we'll figure it out. We'll let you know the details on that. But yeah.
So thanks to everybody who participated. Thanks to everybody who has rated, reviewed, subscribed to the channel on YouTube, followed us on your favorite podcasting app. All those reviews and comments and subscriptions really do help us grow the channel exponentially. So we appreciate each and every one of you. We'll see you later this week. But for me and Richie, this has been another edition of the Knight Report podcast, signing off.